everybody, Kimberly here, and I am thrilled to share with you my horror-filled game night. This is my perfect Halloween game night with all of the thrills and chills and horrific games that I can think of that I would love to play with my friends. And I'm going to say this is also adult-themed just because the games are a little higher on the complexity level, and they also take a longer amount of time. And then lastly, they are pretty horrific, and I don't necessarily think kids would be into it, or it might be a little bit too scary for them. So for those reasons, I would recommend this being adult only. I will have a really fun, kid-friendly, family-friendly Halloween game night special coming out soon, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Now, to get started with my list, I actually want to throw you a freebie. This is going to be game 0 of my game night because it is a solo game. This is me wanting to play before my friends get here because I love getting into the spirit. I love it, and this game is perfect for a solo horrific experience. The game I'm talking about? Yeah, Final Girl. Oh, Final Girl is so fun. You recreate a horror film as the final girl, and your job is to not only live, you have to make it through the night, you also are trying to kill your opponent, your foe. And in Camp Happy Trails, it's Hans the Butcher. Now, there are all these other packs that can augment the base game, giving you a brand new map and location and new characters and items and equipment and things like that that are just phenomenally themed. And I would recommend playing all of them. So with Final Girl, it's a really, really cool, changeable deck builder, and that's just like the craziest thing because you think when you do a deck builder, once you add a card to your hand, it's there forever. Well, in this game, your cards you add to your hand, and some of them you keep because they're your basic cards, but then others that you invest in and use, you have to put back into the supply to reinvest in during that buy cards phase. So you're buying really, really cool cards, but it takes time and energy and actions. And you have to spend your time very carefully because this is a time pressure sensitive game where Hans the Butcher is getting more and more and more powerful and bloodthirsty and killing all these campers, and you have to go and try to save campers. You have to beef up yourself and get some really cool equipment along the way at all these really fun locations around this lake. You feel like you are absolutely in a cool camp with a bunch of teenagers. And you have to then finally face off against Hans the Butcher, your foe. And it just has so much theme, it has so much fun and flair. I think the really cool thing too is that you have dice, and dice resolve your actions but in a very unique way because you can sometimes augment your dice or mitigate them by paying cards, which of course is your time and energy and actions, as I mentioned before. Cards are precious, and so are your actions that you spend. So there's this wonderful pressure, there's so much lovely theme, and I just can't get enough of this game, which is perfect for the half hour before all my friends show up when we jump into games that don't just have one player for them. But Final Girl, love it. I'm starting there with game 0. Okay, so game night is officially on. All my friends have showed up, and I am ready to play. The game that I want to begin with is a cooperative game that starts on Horror Light, I'm going to call, because we're going to move into some other really horrific stuff. It is Horrified! Yeah, this is the game that I want to begin with because Horrified has some really, really lovely theme while it keeps things a little light. You are going to be playing with your friends cooperatively trying to save townsfolk, which if you lose too many, you actually lose the game. So saving them is really great, but they also give you a benefit once they reach their intended destination. You are also trying to avoid getting caught by the creatures that you're playing with, and in this game there are 6 monsters, and you're going to pick a number of those monsters in any combination to play with. And there are easier ones and fewer that you can pick to maybe scale for an easier, lighter game. Or if you're familiar with this game, you can scale it up and say, I'm playing with some of the harder monsters, and I'm also going to play with more monsters to give us a real challenge here. I like that players have a special character that they have an ability with, and they get to use something and do something really cool on their turn. Because you are playing together, but you have to go your turn and then the monster's turn. And the next player's turn, the monster's turn. And there's all these alternating turns where the monsters get to go after every character's turn. So in larger games, it might be a while before it gets back to you, but you're always talking and you're always helping out and you're always strategizing. And the map is something to look at. I mean, it's fantastic. I just love all the locations. And when you go to a location, there might be one of those tokens that are drawn. They give you some special thing that might help out with your objective to defeat one of the monsters in the game, or it just might be defense, because if a monster hits you for points, you can discard those tokens as your defense. It deflects off of you and you discard this token to show that you weren't actually hurt or hit. So I think that there's so many fun multi-purpose items in this game, and there's just so much theme and flair. I think the really cool thing about this is the way the monsters operate. They each have their own focus and they each do something really cool and different. So if you're playing with Dracula, you have a very different objective to kind of trap and kill Dracula and remove him from the game. Versus if you're playing with the creature from the Black Lagoon, or if you're playing with Frankenstein and the Bride. And so these monsters just come to life in a very fun, cartoonish horror way. And I think the graphics, along with the cool cards and actions, just pair together to start off the night perfectly for my horror-themed Halloween game night. Okay, moving into my second game of the night, right after Horrified, where players work together, now divide into two different teams. One is the hunted and the other is the hunter. The game is Nyctophobia, the hunted. So in this game, one player is going to be the hunter. They are an axe murderer and they are trying to kill the other players at the table and prevent them from finding the car and radioing for help because they are lost in this maze of a board. Now, everybody else at the table, from 2 to 4 players, will be the hunted. And the really interesting thing about this game is it has a sensory deprivation. It has an aspect of no sight. That's what makes this game really interesting. And it also makes it really scary because your sight is taken away from you by wearing blackout glasses. And players only are allowed to touch certain parts of the board where they are, and they have to remember where they've been and navigate their way through this tunnel, this maze, this forest, trying to avoid the attention of this axe murderer who is the hunter at the table. And it is just something else. When you play and you're not looking at things, when you play and you're worried about where you are, you have no idea where your other players are. You're all on the same team, but you start in different places and you may or may not ever meet up. But the goal is to, of course, unite at the car, which is in a specific location on the board, and you are going to radio for help and get away. This requires communication. It requires memory. It requires fortitude because it's so creepy, it's so scary. And you better believe that if you are the hunter, you're putting on a show. You are really putting those players through it, giving them the best experience of the night. So find your player at the table who really wants to be more of a GM role, where they get to guide people and make sure everyone's playing correctly and remind people gently of the roles and make sure that everyone's just having a fun time, because this game can be very memorable. This game can be just so lovely with its tactile experience. And I think this really ups the game from Horrified into real horror. It's pretty scary. It's pretty creepy. And I think players would get into this in a heartbeat. Okay, now I'm so excited about this game because we thought running around wielding axes and trying to murder people wasn't enough, because this game there's even more murder. The game is The Bloody Inn. Now, this game asks every single player to become a murderer in this town. You've got this inn with all of these travelers, and the travelers come in and you can use them in a variety of ways. You can ask them to become accomplices for you. You can turn them into annexes because cards are multifunctional. And you can also murder them and bury their corpse under an annex that you have previously built. Now, the fun thing about this game is that you're trying to avoid police suspicion, and you are also trying to maximize this engine you've got, because it's such a tight game. It's such a great strategy game that it leaves little room for mistakes or errors. And if you've got just a streamlined plan and you're avoiding police suspicion and you are, activating all the right people and using their special bonus, which means that they have a proclivity towards something. So you pay for your cards, and if they have a matching symbol for what you're investing in, you get to return that card to your hand. So if you're doing those choices, if you're really using things in the most efficient way, you're going to be successful here. But I sure do love the theme, and I love the idea that this is just an inn, that you are just like picking off travelers here and there, again, trying to avoid suspicion. But it's just a wonderful, wonderful strategy game with cards that have that multifunction use. It's so fun, and I think perfect for that middle game of my horror-filled game night. Okay, now we're moving into game 4 of game night, and I think this one's a really, really fun one to play, particularly if you've got people who are ready to spend the night with you. The game is My Father's Work. Now, I haven't had a chance to talk about this on the channel yet, but this is it. This is the game, because I want to just dive into that Victorian mad scientist world, and there's some really creepy stuff that happens here in town, but also with your character, because this game takes place over 3 generations. You're essentially playing 3 long rounds, and what you do in the first round affects your character in the next round, because you are a descendant of the character you play in the first round. And then third round, you are a descendant yet again of that character in round 2 that was a descendant from round 1. So there's just some lovely, lovely theme here that you're passing down horrors and traits and trauma and all these different fascinating traits and characteristics that you feel like you should be doing better with or planning for in previous rounds. You look back 2020, of course, hindsight. So there's this really cool central playing area where you open up a spiral notebook to a particular page, and that's going to be your town. That's going to depict places that you can go to activate your workers, because every player is going to have these workers that they get to move out to certain locations. These characters are not equal, though. They have different functions and different fears or abilities to go certain places. And so you really have to make sure you manage your worker management system, but you can go inside of your own mansion in your own house. You could also go to any of those places out in the central area, which is going into town. So the theme is just incredibly spot on. It just feels so real and lived in. And the really cool thing about this game is it comes with an app, and it has a lot of storytelling elements to it. So players feel like they're involved and engaged. And whenever I would hear my name spoken, because players get to type in their character name, then I just was like, oh, that's me, that's my character, and that's, it just feels so cool. And I really just love reading the stories and clicking on super secret stuff where you get to look at things that other players don't get to look at. And you get to just, be a mad scientist. You get to create all of these fascinating things. And I loved it because you have this kind of major goal. This is kind of like a life goal or a generational goal that you want to achieve. And it's like the big, 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 scientist experiment. And sometimes you succeed in it, sometimes you don't. Whenever I played, I was not able to actually complete that experiment. But on the other hand, Lewis was, and he got to do really cool stuff. I think he built Frankenstein's monster, essentially. So I can't get enough of this. It's just so fun, and I just fall right into it. And I love the glossy spiral notebook that you get to look at that changes based on what choices you make in the game. I just really like that the different figures give you different actions or restrictions. And so when you go into town as yourself, you don't ever have to pay money. And the reason you would have to pay money is because if another figure is there, you have to pay because other players have gone before you, and it's just a little bit more costly. But if you go as yourself, as the scientist, there's no cost, and you get to do that action twice, which is so cool. So you're really saving when do you activate your character versus your spouse, and then versus your helpers and other figures that you get throughout the game, because you can get more and you can also lose more. I just think that the activation and the worker placement is a really, really strong element to this. Now, there's also resource management because you're collecting a bunch of stuff and then you want to build these experiments, you want to activate them, and it's just so fun. Now, as with any mad scientist game, you are going to have an insanity track and you're going to have a creepy track because all the townspeople think you're a little weird locking yourself up in your house and then coming out every now and then just to grab a couple things here and there, like dead bodies and stuff like that. So there's just wonderful features to this game that really keep you in check. Now, there also are things like compulsions, and I feel like if you go too insane or if you have, too many, you get maladjusted, essentially. And so there's just wonderful terminology and cost for the actions that you do, because yes, that's exactly what it is. So thematically, it's all there, and I love the little bits and pieces here that just make you feel like you are a person with a whole mansion that you got to keep in track and in tow, and you are running this because you're just crazy. You want to do all the things and be a super cool mad scientist. There are also ways to keep some progress from generation to generation, and it just, again, thematically fits. You can keep a journal, and that logs your progress on this kind of tech tree spot in your home. And so once you have that progress, you get to keep it from generation to generation, and I love that feature. And the other thing is that when you complete experiments, you always get to keep one from the previous generation. And so you can carry over whichever ones you have finished that particular round or generation and keep it into the next one. And so there are some really wonderful ways to kind of keep your progress while having to do a lot more starting over than you'd like from generation to generation. Okay, now some of you might say, okay, Kim, like, seriously, my father's work in a game night that has 5 games in it? Well, if you are questioning your friend's loyalty and you want to play a shorter game that is equally fun, thematic, and creepy, I'm going to recommend an alternative for that 4th game position that I think is just as fantastic and super fun to play, that's actually cooperative instead of competitive. It is Mansions of Madness. Now, this game, as well as My Father's Work, has an app in the 2nd edition that runs it for you, and there are plenty of lovely scenarios to play with now. There are a handful of them out. But essentially in this game, you are working together to explore a location, find clues, and solve a mystery. And yes, you're not able to get everything, which is always the most frustrating part of this game, is you always want to like flip over every cushion and explore behind every painting and, look closer at that sculpture or whatever, and you just can't. There's some fantastically mysterious and suspicious folks in this game that act as like the NPCs that you are investigating and exploring as a team, but boy, is it loads of fun. So substitute Mansions of Madness for My Father's Work if you've got friends who are already starting to yawn by game 4, because I still have my 5th game of the night coming up next. All right, moving on to my 5th game of the night. This is going to close out my horror-themed Halloween game night with my friends, and I want it to be cooperative. I want us to play together and hopefully win together. The game is The Night Cage. I think the Night Cage is such a great way to end the night because it's a really challenging game. And I'm gonna say, maybe set the mood a little bit. Dim the lights or light a bunch of candles and turn out the lights because this game is all about being in the dark. It's all about not being able to see. And you can really create a whole lot of mood in your room if you have the table set up, you've got the candle with all the tiles in it, and as the tiles go, as you take the tiles, the candle gets shorter and shorter and shorter until it snuffs out and is gone. And so the theme is there with that tile tower that looks like the candle. And you are trying to find these keys. Now you start in different spaces and you have to find a key each and then get to an exit point without dying. And if one person dies, if one person can't do it, if you can't make it to the space with a key, the whole team loses. This game is fantastically themed, and I really like how it has actions and ideas or concepts that fit so well. So you gain nerve when you do something that is kind of confidence filled, or you're taking a chance at something and you really got the nerve, and you can spend nerve later on to do certain things. And so you're kind of banking that nerve. And players are drawing a tile and exploring on their turn, and there might be a creature, there might be a monster that can see down all hallways going in one full direction until there's a block or a wall or something that stops it from seeing. And so the creatures can be in this configuration that really makes things super, super hard for you to navigate. But because it's a cooperative game, players are talking to each other and working together and trying to figure out, well, if I go this direction, then maybe you should go that direction and explore over here because I can get to this key that so-and-so found but couldn't get to. And then I'm going to do this and make it over here. And you just have to figure out what you're up to because this game is just it's so tight. Like, you really can't afford too many mess ups because it's really, really intense. And I love the idea of this ending the night because hopefully you won't let the light dim all the way until everything snuffs out and the characters lose, which is you. I want everyone to win together. There are also ways for players to light each other's candles so they can see better. And that's a really fun feature that allows you to help your fellow players in the game and allow them to be better for the team. And I like that a lot because I don't want everyone just to be on their own and working together, but you can actually go to your other people in the game and help them. And I really like that because there are pits and monsters and traps and all sorts of stuff that's going to get in your way for you to not accomplish the goal of getting the keys and getting to the exit. All right, everybody, that's it. Game night is over. I hope you really enjoyed my horror-filled Halloween game night, starting with Game 0, Final Girl, all the way to the end of the night, where it's probably 1 a.m. in the morning and my friends are stumbling home. But it was loads of fun, full of horror, scares, thrills, and chills. Let me know in the comments what horror games or what Halloween games do you play to celebrate this season in the comments below. And I will see you later. Bye, everybody.